Wir hören die 269. Ausgabe von Crop FM. Wir schreiben den 18. November 2011. Mein Gast heute Abend ist Georg Thomas und es geht um alternative Heilmethoden und schamanistische Traditionen rund um den Erdball. Bei dieser Sendung begleitet uns wieder der Cropcom, erreichbar über die Website von CropFM, cropfm.at, cropfm.at, einfach die Fragen reintippen und vor allem im zweiten Teil der Sendung dann gehe ich sehr gern auf die Kommentare ein. Zu dieser Sendung gibt es einen Newsletter, gratis abonnierbar von der Startseite von CropFM, cropfm.at, cropfm.at. Man kann mir sehr gerne mailen, Link dazu findet sich ebenfalls gleich unterm Header oder einfach an cropfm@moor.at. Alle Sendungen erscheinen als Podcast im Archiv, entweder als RSS-Feed oder eben zum direkt herunterladen als MP3 oder Real Audio. Jede Sendung kann auch einzeln verlinkt werden. Freue mich dann immer, wenn das dann auch passiert. Vor allem von YouTube-Videos aus, wo dann doch interessante Links etc. noch beim Sendungseintrag sind. Und manche hören es halt auch lieber als MP3. Oder die meisten eigentlich. Das Forum wird betreut von Valedor, Unarmed, Wingman und Eraser. Und das CropFM-Shirt gibt's auch für Hardcore-Freaks. Vielleicht ein ideales Weihnachtsgeschenk. Auch auf der Startseite oben rechts der Link auf das Kickshop. Und natürlich, last but not least, der CropFM Spenden-Button. Spenden kann man mir über PayPal oder Überweisung. Und an dieser Stelle wie immer ein großes Danke an alle, die das schon getan haben. Gehostet wird das Ganze von Fetsnetz. Gerd Brandner betreut die Maschine, eine ziemlich dicke Maschine, seit Juli 2011. Seitdem gibt es keine Staus mehr. Läuft eigentlich ganz wunderbar. Und betreut eben von Fetsnetz, fetsnetz.it, der Host von CropFM. Am 20. November gibt es einen Vortrag von Klaus Dohner in Wien über die aktuellen Funde und Entdeckungen sowie die geplante Ausstellung im Jahr 2012, im kommenden Jahr also. Die wird, glaube ich, sehr spannend. Er hat mir in Wisokor, als wir uns da getroffen haben, schon ein bisschen was erzählt. Bin sehr gespannt darauf. Und mehr dazu auf www.unsolved-mysteries.info. Und im Archiv von CropFM finden sich übrigens auch 2 hochspannende Interviews mit Klaus Dohner. Schwere Nebenwirkungen, Grippeimpfstoff zurückgerufen. Der US-Pharmakonzern Baxter hat alle Chargen einer seiner beiden Grippeimpfstoffe zurückgerufen. Christiane Körner, die Vizepräsidentin der Apothekerkammer, hat einen Bericht der ORF-TV-Sendung Wien heute bestätigt. Sie sagt, das erfolgte vorsorglich von Seiten des Unternehmens. Es war absolut keine Gefahr. Doch etwas widersprüchlich, ich meine, so absolut keine Gefahr, für mein Verständnis zumindest, aber okay. Sehr verständlich, aber dass sich viele bei derartigen Meldungen diesem Risiko von vornherein nicht aussetzen wollen und nach Alternativen suchen. Ja, und trau deinen Augen nicht. Die Ausgabe 8 gibt's heute ebenfalls zu hören. Jonathan Dieles erzählt über 3 gänzlich unterschiedliche Sichtungen, die er im Laufe der letzten gut 20 Jahre gemacht hat, seit Anfang der 90er. Neben einem sehr tief liegenden Objekt konnte er mittels Infrarotausrüstung auch sogenannte Fastwalkers beobachten. Hier ein Auszug aus unserem voraufgezeichneten, das ist also nicht live, unser voraufgezeichnetes Gespräch, und das gesamte Interview ist dann wie immer nach der Sendung online abrufbar. Hier so Jonathan Dieles über Forschungsschiffe und Fastwalkers.
Ja, der Fastwalker, der hat sich ja, wie gesagt, das war eben 28.09. diesen Jahres. Da hat er sich aus der, sag ich mal, nördlichen Richtung nach Südosten hat er sich bewegt. Und unwahrscheinlich schnelle Geschwindigkeit. Das Interessante daran ist, dass ich einen Tag später um die gleiche Uhrzeit mich wieder dahingestellt habe.
Okay.
In der Hoffnung, vielleicht sehe ich ihn ja wieder.
Ja.
Ne? Aber da war nichts, da kam keiner. Aber interessanterweise kam der Fastwalker 2,5 Stunden später wieder. Und zwar um 2:34 Uhr. Aber aus der anderen Richtung. Also okay. Genau die entgegengesetzte Richtung.
Okay.
Wirkte fast so, als wäre er für einen Tag weg gewesen und ist dann in der darauffolgenden Nacht eben wieder zurückgeflogen. So fast hätte ich den Eindruck.
Hochinteressant. Gleiche Schlingerbewegung wie beim ersten Mal?
War ganz genau das, ja. Es war korrekt das gleiche Objekt, zumindest im Verhalten.
Mhm. Hast du eine Idee, was dieser Fastwalker sein könnte?
Also das wirkt für mich auf jeden Fall schon wie ein Flugobjekt. Und ich vermute mal, diese Schwankungen, dass er die Flugbahn nicht richtig korrekt halten kann, könnte ich mir vorstellen, dass das Objekt kein Gewicht hat. Es muss also irgendwie auf seine Umgebung irgendwie reagieren. Und diese schwankende Bewegung, so könnte ich es mir erklären, resultiert daraus, dass eben 0 Gewicht vorhanden ist.
Crop FM.
You're far from home, baby.
Ja, das war Jonathan Dieles in der 8. Ausgabe von Trau deinen Augen nicht, der Miniserie auf Crop FM, sozusagen Grassroot UFO. Mein heutiger Gast ist Georg Thomas. Ein großes Danke natürlich auch an Carina für den Kontakt, den sie hergestellt hat. Und ja, hier geht's gleich weiter mit Georg Thomas und alternativen Heilmethoden. After curtailing his career as an attorney in Georgia, Georg Thomas has become one of the most internationally sought-after experts in the world of alternative healing. Starting with a 3-year apprenticeship with a Native American medicine man in Black Mountain, North Carolina, his studies and training led him to the native medicine healers, to the rainforest of Central America, to the healers of Africa, and the highest Buddhist monks, as well as traditional European healers along his pathway of bringing together the traditions of East and West. His message is that of simplicity, and he's my guest this evening. Good evening, George.
Oh, good evening. Thank you for having me on your program.
It's a pleasure, and thanks to Karina, who brought us together, so to say, and made it possible that we do this show tonight. I would like to start off this conversation tonight with a very basic question, a question that a lot of people have in their mind when they hear the word healer or healing. Is it, in your opinion, is it possible can one person heal another person?
What a wonderful question, and you've gotten exactly to the heart of some of the controversies and some of the problems that we have trouble with. The human body is self-healing. It is a self-correcting, self-fixing machine in some ways, and it is true that the healers, doesn't matter whether they're natural medicine or allopathic or whatever name is, doesn't actually do the healing. Sometimes what we do is discover a problem that we can remedy. If you don't have enough food, if you don't have enough water, if you're not breathing correctly, if you're suffocating, then that's very serious. So we can change these problems. But once we do that, once we make sure you have nutrition and you're being cared for, then it's up to the body to heal itself. Sometimes this happens, and sometimes we say no matter what we did, we lost the patient. And then that happens to everybody in every field. And in this case, what we can do is respect the person's decision to be living or the person's decision to live no longer. But in a very serious way, healers do not heal others. However, oftentimes we can say, look at what you're doing, or look what's happening to you, or point out something that they can change that will make their life more pleasant.
So there is no magic but it's obvious, but nevertheless, it's I think important to point out, a healer can't do any magic. Doesn't matter whether he is doing shiatsu or he's an energy healer or an energy worker or someone who works with herbs. The patient is always a very crucial element, or the crucial element in this equation. Now, what about traditional medicine? About a surgeon, for example.
This term tradition is sometimes applied to what I call allopathic, or the kind of doctors that we find work in the hospital, or what was the tradition of our own youth. The doctors like surgeons and people who use pharmaceutical drugs and that sort of thing. These people are extremely well educated in what they do. They have a huge amount of resources available to them. They're very well connected, very well networked, and they do fabulous and wonderful work. There are a few problems that they're not equipped to deal with. And so oftentimes the people that come to me are people who have tried everything that the surgeon and the pharmaceuticals, the doctors that do the oncology, all the other specialists, they've tried all these things from this type of a traditional doctor, and when it has failed, they come to see me. That's probably 80% or 90% of the people who have come to see me have found that they didn't get the results they were looking for in the allopathic system, and so they look outside of the system for some additional source of help.
I've been doing this show now for about 10 years, and something that I noticed, especially when preparing for this show, is that most of the healers, again in a very broad sense, I interviewed, energy workers, etc., are female. Is it that women are more attracted to this kind of work, or is it that they're more able to do it? I mean, or do you think that's not at all the case? And I've just talked to, it's just a pure coincidence that I mostly interviewed female healers.
Yes, I don't think it's coincidence at all. I think that there is a greater number of women drawn to this type of work. There are some reasons for that. In years in the past, it's not true now, but in years in the past, women were forbidden to be healers, forbidden to be doctors, or have positions of power in the systems of healing. They could be the nurses. They could be the person that cleans up the mess. But the position of power or authority, the decision makers, these positions were denied to women. And nowadays, women are looking for ways to have more authority and more power. However, in natural medicine that you would find in the tribes, of the people that are not part of the modern systems, oftentimes the healer would be a woman. More often than not, I suspect. The women have nourishing and caring for others as part of their natural makeup. And so being a healer is essentially someone who has discovered how to solve many of their own problems. And after learning how to solve your own problems, we then find we have a duty or responsibility to look after others. And women do this job maybe a little better than men do. Men can do it very wonderfully, but the allopathic physicians have in the past preferred men, and still do in many ways. When they're looking in a hospital for an administrator, sometimes they first think of men, and if none is available, then they think the possibility of a woman. Now a lot of that is changing in politics, it's changing in education, it's changing in the whole world. But yes, being a natural healer or being somebody who is more or less self-taught is much more attractive to women than it is to men.
All right. By the way, you have a great voice.
Thank you.
It's probably healing in itself.
Thank you. One of the tools that I work with is the voice. When I speak to someone who is confused and upset, has a lot of problems in their life, the voice is the first really way they get in contact with me. And so I work very strongly with the voice, learn how to use my own. And my wife has been an opera singer most of her life. Now she's produces opera. She founded an opera foundation in Central America, in Panama. And one of the things that I do with my skill as a healer is that I work with singers. Now we're doing this worldwide. And oftentimes I find myself doing what I would call tuning a singer. The singer, like every other person, expresses themselves with their voice. However, for the singer that needs such great ability to express, such power, their voice is distorted when they're sick or when they have pain or problems. So one of the things I do with singers to use their voice more powerfully is take away the illness, take away the confusion or the pain in the body. And it's the same with people who do sales or other people in your business have to use the voice in a very, very powerful way. It's how we reach out and touch people very, very much with the media. So I've worked on my voice, but I appreciate your speaking about it.
Yeah, it just came to me. I mean, I think that's a very important part, and it's relaxing actually to listen to you. And that's also a very interesting concept of tuning singers. I mean, since I do a little bit of singing myself, I might maybe need some tuning sometimes. Anyway, how did how did you become a practitioner and teacher of alternative medicine, starting off as being a lawyer, which is, people might think that's quite far away from healing anyone.
It does seem to be separate. It's been a big advantage for me because when people consider coming to me, they want to know who I am and what was my training. And since I cannot say I went to medical school and I have this training, I become more credible for a lot of people, or they would trust me more because they know that I've been through the educational filtering system. Sometimes I think of the schools not as places for great education, but more as a filtering system to see that the people who are not responsible, to see that the people who won't study, who won't follow orders, who have so much concern only for themselves and not for others, our school systems filter them out of the even for the potential of being a doctor. You can't even apply to be a doctor with the government until you have the permission of the schools. We have from the standpoint of a healer and somebody that knows about this, we have a funny situation. In order to be a healer in the system we have now, first I have to get the permission of the schools. So I have to graduate through many classes. I have something like 27 years in education, as a student. And then I got a doctorate in law, and for many people that makes me reliable or trustworthy. And I can understand that. If they've spent many of their years through the same filtering system, the schools, then they want to rely on someone who has passed the same test they have. But as a lawyer, I could see the changes that were happening to my profession, and I didn't like some of these things. The profession of law was becoming far more parasitic than what I wanted to participate in. Some doctors tell me that they're dissatisfied with being doctors as well. Actually, a lot of doctors tell me that. But then I looked around to see what I wanted to do in life, and I've very much had an interest in people and how they work. And one of the things that I did when I was a lawyer is visited a medicine man. I went there because my girlfriend at the time was diagnosed with cancer. And I drove her, I accompanied her because she needed a driver to take her to some hours distance drive. And I was interested in what the medicine man did. I asked him questions, and his response was to come and spend time watching him. He actually said, come and work with me. So it was interesting. I found a day to do that, and then I liked it so much on the first day, it ended up with a 3-year apprenticeship. Now, an apprenticeship is not like a school. An apprenticeship is where you keep your eyes open and your mouth closed. I didn't ask questions of my teacher, very different than the school, and the teacher didn't ask questions of me. My job was to observe very accurately what was happening and be able to do what the medicine man did. And it took me 3 years to become the medicine man. Later, when he died, I became the medicine man. Now, I did not want to work where he worked or do things exactly the way he did. So I transitioned from an attorney by doing more and more healing, more seminars, and then less in the practice of law. I changed in 1992. I closed my law office and became a medicine man full time. So I have now many years experience doing this.
That's interesting. So, didn't you also fell ill when you were a little child? And I read it.
As a child, I had a health problem, and I didn't understand why I was sick or what really had happened for 50 years. I've naturally had some of the abilities of healers. And one of the abilities of healers is to take the problem of someone else and take it on yourself. So as a child, I was being very sick, in pain oftentimes, and I realized later that the reason for that is I was doing this so that my mother, father, and mother didn't have to do this. I was taking on their problems and feeling them. And I see that oftentimes. People tell me their children are in serious medical problems. And I say, come to see me. And they say, well, the child, don't you understand, the child can't travel? And I say, no, I didn't say bring the child. I said, you come. And so I can change the problems that the parents have, and the children become sometimes instantly better and I never see them. So as a child, I had a serious illness. The doctors described it as allergies and asthma. And the medicine was to change my diet. I ate only one food for nearly a year. It was oats, and nothing else. No milk, no sugar, no bread, no vegetables. Only oats. And then it was a very good medicine for me because I recovered and became much stronger.
Did that later influence you in your decision to become a healer yourself?
I'm sure it did. What my mother found at the time, at that time my mother and father separated, but what my mother discovered was I had a serious life-threatening illness, and medicine had no answer. Now, she did get from one doctor this idea that I should have just one food. In desperation, we did that, and it worked very much. So I had a very strong life experience that indicates that there may be some more answers, that we're not limited to only what allopathic medicine has to offer. Now, I had another life experience when I was about 12 that was strong. When I was about 12, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And she was told by the doctors that made this diagnosis that it was terminal, that she would live possibly another 6 months. She did not want to die. She thought it was her job to be a mother and to take care of my brother and I and my sister, and she made up her mind that she would not die. She was then being treated by a doctor who was very famous. She had gone through a whole lot of doctors, but she had gotten to a guy that was very famous, very strong, treated people from all over the world, and he had a lot of experience with cancer. His father and his uncle were also very well-known doctors. And he told her, I remember her repeating it to me when I was 12 years old, that in all the years of their experience treating people from all over the world with cancer, they had never lost a single person to cancer. Nobody had ever died of cancer. But he added, many people have died of fear of cancer. So these words from a doctor, in some ways they're kind of corny and kind of a silly way to express something. But my mother said to herself, she said it to me also, then I won't die, because I have something that is more important to me, something that's stronger than this cancer, and that was the need to take care of me and her children. I never forgot that lesson, and I often use it today. I know how to stop people from dying of cancer when they come to see me by reminding them why they're living.
Mm-hmm. Now, that leads me to a question that Yvonne just posted in the chat. There is a chat running live, and the listeners can pose questions on the air or online. Some healers claim that it doesn't matter if the patient believes in the treatment or in the healing or not. What do you think about this? Is it important that the patient believes that this is going to heal him, or are there treatments that work anyway?
What is a weakness or a failure, if you want to make a real strong word, of allopathic medicine? I'm using allopathic meaning the sort of doctors we find in our modern hospitals and clinics, is the separation between the mind and the body. There's a reason. It's historical. It comes from the religion that the mind is thought of as a separate sort of thing, a different thing than the body, and the body is so different from the mind. One is physical, we can touch it, we can measure it, and the other we can only know through introspection, or we can only use thought to know about thought. And so they say these things are separated. Now, it comes from the belief that the mind and the body are separate, and when we die, of course, the mind continues on, or the soul, that the use of the word soul is an expression for the mental things, continues living, and the body rots away. In the type of medicine that I do, which is sometimes given the name holistic, meaning treating all of the body, not a part of it, sometimes natural medicine. The modern terms now tend to be alternative medicine, complementary, or integrative medicine. In these types of approaches to healing, we say that the mind and the body are one, that they cannot be separated. Now, under this approach, it doesn't really matter if you're focusing on the mind or not focusing on the mind. Whatever you do is going to if you change anything, it's going to change both the body and the mind. Or if you do something physical, the mind is changed. If you do something mental, the body is changed. So I don't focus so much, or I'm not so concerned on whether somebody's thinking the way, we would maybe want them to think, or some ideal pattern. I work with them whatever they're doing. If they say it's not important that what they think, that's fine with me. If they say it's very important what they think, that's fine with me. I can still make the changes, and it's not. I'm not relying on their belief system.
Could you give us an overview of of the various kinds of alternative medicine, and of course also on the various traditions all around the world that you have a very big insight? I mean, you traveled the whole world and you worked with a lot of different traditions. So can you give us an overview of the different concepts or traditions that exist?
I'll be glad to. Now, I've said that the mind and the body are a partnership. And what I mean by this is neither is first. We can't say first the mind and then the body, or first the body and then the mind. So if I make a change to the body, it will change the mind, or vice versa. So I can use touch and create a lot of change in people because I can just rearrange the way the body is. And one of the techniques I use, I call body straightening, but it's done by chiropractors, done by osteopaths, it's done by many people around the world. That these traditions are very old. We have sometimes pictures of people straightening the body or changing it this way. They're 3,000 years old. So I use a lot of touch and moving the body. That's a very important thing for me. I can call it massage. I could call it chiropractic. The name I make for it is body straightening. And I say that we have to be erect, that our body needs to be connected to the earth with our feet when we stand up, and our head needs to be connected to the heavens or to the spirit world, and that we are literally a connector between the heavens and earth, that we are the doers on the earth. To make this even stronger, I often say that if the spirit world wants changes on the earth, they've got to get my help, because I'm the doers. The angels don't come here. At least it's very hard to see that and make changes in people. That they need the help of a human being to make that. So I use touch. I use sound. You've already mentioned that with my voice, but I can make lots of sounds in different ways and say different words. Use special words. Use even what you could call magical words. I agree with you that it's not magic. However, if you see something and you don't know why it's working or how it works, it seems to be magic. And a lot of people are looking for something magic. That is to say, they want to be cured or changed by something they don't understand. I'll be a little bit clearer about that. In the world of spiritual things, spiritual people, you can often read that if we're sick, it's because we want to be. If we die, it's because we want to die. Some people, very deep and wise spiritual people, say that we have what we want, or that we can create illness, or we can create not illness. And so if this is true, if it's true that we choose, then we have to find out why is it that people choose to be sick. It was a very important question for me, and I discovered that all the sickness of the people that came to see me, or the sickness that I had, originates probably with a conflict inside me. That is that want something, but I want the opposite thing. Or I want something in a way that if I get it, I don't get something else. It becomes an internal conflict. Using that idea of an internal conflict, I looked at all the illnesses that I knew about, cancer or arthritis or any of the infectious diseases or all these things. AIDS is a good example, and I determined or I thought out what is the internal conflict. And each one of the specific diseases have specific internal conflicts or specific mental patterns to go along with the specific physical patterns. So I use words and images sometimes to change people's belief systems or to say, your choice is apples or oranges. Pick one, but you can't have both. And that's a very important healing technique, is to resolve the internal conflicts that lead to disease. So I use water, I use air, I use food, I use herbs. I can use needles. I can use a lot of other things that I don't use because in my world, as an unlicensed practitioner, as a person that is not looked on favorably by governments and by medical systems, I have to be very careful what I do. So I don't use needles. I don't use surgeries. I don't use machines, even though some of these machines I own and use for myself or I have for my own benefit. Certain special machines, but I don't use them in my normal practice. So most of the things that I use is part of my normal practice, and most of the things that I teach about are what you can do with your hands, with your voice, with your own images. We can create special pictures in our own mind and transmit or communicate the images and pictures in our mind to other people. That is possible. It's been one of the great healing techniques since people began studying these things. I'm able to influence or change what we could best understand as stored memories. To better explain that, let me say this: allopathic physicians, really everybody in medicine, knows that a lot of diseases are genetic. What they mean by that, if your mom and dad had a certain problem, you would be more likely to have it. Or if it's your grandparents had it, it's more likely that you have it. And so that's a physical thing, but it's also a mental thing. So if there's a pattern that's stored or that can be repeated generation to generation, for lack of a better word, because we don't have good words to describe this, I just say stored memories. And sometimes I've learned to influence the decisions people make because of the stored memories, or more clearly, I'll say it this way. When a traumatic event happens in your life, you make a decision. But it could have happened to your parents or your grandparents or their parents. Then we inherit the decision that they made, just the same as we inherit the color of our hair or the shape of our nose or the size of our body. All life is inherited. What we do when we influence, our life today based on something that happened a generation or two ago or even longer, is we don't change what happened then. For instance, if you were in a war and you were injured or killed, we don't change what happened. We change the decision that you make because of what happened. So one of the techniques I use, it's a very powerful one. I enjoy explaining to people to sort of open up their awareness of these potentials, is that we can use trance or hypnosis or just going into our memories and seeing these things that happened sometime, not in our lifetime. And we're aware of them. It's called regression in hypnosis. There are lots of other terms for it. And when somebody sees these things that have been influencing their life, they don't change what happened, but they can change the decision they make about, or that was made earlier about what happens. Have I said it in a way that you get the idea of what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I just was thinking about something, a thought that came to me. I have also interviewed a female healer. She's a Sangoma. Since you also are familiar with African traditions, maybe you're
Sure.
with Sangoma priests. And she was very big on cellular memory, the memory in the cells that she tried to, when working with a client or a patient or someone who comes to her and asks her for help, she tries to erase. So actually what you are saying.
Yes, all the religions answer this question. They have to answer it. Because human beings sometimes have what seem like dreams, or it's just like having a memory of something that happened, and we can see the colors, we can feel and taste and re-experience what happened, but we know it didn't happen in our lifetime. So how do we deal with that? Now, in Buddhism, they say that the soul goes from one person to another. It's sort of I would say the transmigration of the soul, how it can go from one body to another body. And that's a very strong part of their religious concepts. In Christianity, people do not have this idea that the soul goes from one person to another, but they say that we were a spirit before we were born, then we live this lifetime, and then we go to heaven or hell, or maybe purgatory. And we don't always deal very well. And so our science doesn't deal very well with these memories that are locked in us. The science of medicine actually separates the mind and the body because the religion did so, and it becomes a blindness of our medicine. And so that's one of the important things that I do, but I don't do that first. I make jokes about it in my seminars. I have to, because sometimes people are so interested in this thing. I say if you're standing by the river and somebody is floating by, you can see that they're drowning and they're yelling, "Help, help, help." You don't help them by saying, "Let's pray." And you don't help them by saying, "Have good spirits, think only good thoughts." You help them by getting in the water and pulling them out and helping them get the water out of their lungs. You don't always do things in any one way. We have to have healers have to have a broad range of tools or modalities we can use, and then the skill is choosing the correct thing for the person now. Sometimes I say if you find somebody who is bleeding, the first thing to do is to stop the bleeding.
Sure. I mean, someone also mentioned in the chat that when you talk about this memory that might not even originate from our life that we're living, from this life, but from something that went on before we even were born. I mean, this is very similar to the concept of reincarnation, isn't it? Or
yes,
is it?
Yes,
right.
That's what I'm saying, is that the Buddhists use reincarnation. It's a part of their religious belief system, and it answers many questions. When you say, why am I having a bad life this time, or a good life? The Buddhists will say it's all cause and effect. When you had a good lifetime in the past, then you have if you did good things, if you did worthy things in a previous lifetime, you're going to have good luck or good fortune in this lifetime. And if you did something unworthy in a previous lifetime, you will have the results in this lifetime. So it's a religion that very much looks into the past. Other groups of people don't talk about the transmigration of the soul. I don't talk about the transmigration of the soul from one person to another. I talk about what we inherit. So I say if your parents had traumatic events, sometimes they made decisions and stored the decisions, or it could be your grandparents or their parents or their parents. So based on certain events that happened, we make decisions and we store the decisions. And so that helps to explain or accounts for why we're doing something this lifetime, and we had no idea why. But it's a way of explaining this to people, and also a way of helping people. If, for instance, if someone lifetime is hurt at love, they will say, I'll never do that again, but I'll never love again. But because we're human beings, we cannot fail to love. We have to love in some way. So what we do is that to protect ourselves, we separate our love centers. The head and the heart and the genitals can be sort of separate love centers. We separate them, and to protect ourselves, when we open one, we close the other two. Now, that's something we can do based on experiences in this lifetime, but we can also inherit this pattern. So if we have a parent who, or both parents, who have only one of these love centers open at a time, it's possible that we can inherit the same pattern, so we find love very difficult. If this is a pattern we have, if we want to be physically or sexually connected with somebody, we'll find someone that we don't like don't love with the heart and can't respect, the type of love of the head. Then that makes children, but the children also have the same pattern and the same behavior. So a lot of times I help people break the decision. The decision was I'll never love again, and make a new decision that says even though I was hurt, I will love more wisely and more fully and more completely. And then if I'm hurt again, instead of shutting down my love systems, I will learn how to deal with the pain, and I'll do it again. I'll love again, only more wisely. So this can be true of any illness. One of the big illnesses we have to deal with in the world today is cancer. The emotional partner, or the mental pattern associated with the physical disease called cancer, are the emotions of loneliness, hopelessness, and helplessness. Now, as a healer, I've dealt with so many people that have cancer. That's one of the reasons people come to me, and they never come to me first. I mean, they go entirely through the whole medical process, often surgeries and radiation and chemotherapy and many other things. And when it's not successful, when the doctors say there's nothing else we can do for you, they come to see me. And I've seen many thousands of these people. They hunt me. They find me wherever I am. I don't have an office. I don't have a license. I don't advertise. And if I told you the numbers of thousands, you would say, wow, this is a lot of people. But they come because somebody told them to come see me. Now, one of the tools that I use is to help them break these mental patterns. I show them how to not be lonely, how to not be hopeless, and how to not be helpless. With the helpless, what you do is you do things. I would give them maybe 20 or 30 things to do a day. Teas to make and take, pills to swallow, baths to take, certain types of exercises or certain types of movement. And each time they're doing these things, very subtly, they're saying to themselves, I'm not helpless, I'm doing these things to help myself. And then the medicine man I worked with would sometimes give them hope. People would come to him and say, please, I'm dying. The doctors say I have only a couple weeks to live. I have cancer. And he would look at him and say, this is ridiculous. Your doctor has made such an error of judgment. You don't have cancer at all. You just have parasites or something. Now, when I first heard him saying that, I felt so foolish to be in his presence that he was saying these things. And then later, it was much later that I understood that he was giving them hope. It may have been foolish hope, but hope doesn't have to be reasonable. Hope is sometimes unreasonable, but nonetheless, it's hope. And then the loneliness is a very strong pattern. People can live in families in which everyone feels lonely, even though there's 30 of them, all feeling lonely in the same house. Now, my mom had cancer, my dad had cancer, my grandmother died of cancer, and I had a sister that died of cancer. So this loneliness, even when we're being connected with people, even when we have families, is epidemic. It's because cancer is epidemic. So what we can do about this loneliness is essentially a spiritual question. However, there's lots of things that we can do to change it. A friend of mine, whose name is Colin Tippin, working with cancer people, discovered that everybody that has cancer has someone in their life they can't forgive. Often for something that they say, oh, this is so terrible, this is so bad, I can never forgive them. And this inability to forgive created loneliness. So he developed a practice called he calls it radical forgiveness, and it's a technique of how to forgive when you can't forgive. His book is translated, I think, into 24 languages now, and he's become famous and well-respected all over the world because he could break one of these essential mental patterns or spiritual patterns of cancer called loneliness. And I have my ways of doing it. Sometimes I use his technique, sometimes others. It's just what's appropriate for the person I'm talking to.
So, I mean, if you understand you correctly, then you also believe, and also someone in the chat just asked this question, that the reason for cancer lies in psychological conflicts. Or in a psychological, well, you call it very specifically loneliness, but it is a psychological thing that is actually the cause of this illness?
I did not say that.
All right.
Let me say something that I said earlier. The mind and the body are in a partnership. The mind is not first, and the body is not first. The physical and the mental are connected, and they are inseparable during life. So that means that it was not first a mental pattern and then it's a physical pattern, nor was it a physical pattern first and then it's a mental. We actually get them at the same time. When we're born, sometimes we get this combination of mental and physical, and sometimes these belief systems are already there, or we can have them developed more through our lifetime. What I discover is once they're already there, once we already have a belief system, internal belief system, life tends to repeat, or we act out. Our life proves what it is we believed to begin with. So I did not say that first comes the mental and then comes the physical. What I said is they're together. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the partnership we inherit when we're born. And it doesn't show up in our lifetime, and sometimes it does show up in our lifetime. However, if you want to change cancer, someone has cancer and you want to change it, part of what you do is change the thinking patterns. But that's also only part of it. I don't just change the thinking patterns. I change oftentimes what they eat, how they breathe, how they hold their body, a whole host of things. The more things that we try, the more things that we do ourselves, the more we feel empowered, the more we feel we have the ability to create our own life in all of its manifestations. So, yes, for people with cancer, I do things that change what they do emotionally or mentally, and I show them how to change their breathing or how to change their posture, or I do these things for them. And I also suggest that they eat certain foods, take certain supplements in the forms of different herbs or vitamins. There's a whole host of things that I would do.
Have you ever heard of a German doctor called Dr. Hamer?
I've heard of him. I'm not very strong, not very knowledgeable with what he does by name, but the things that we do are really, really repetitious. In every culture, all of the things that we do tend to be the same as other cultures.
Yeah, that was also one of my questions. So there are a lot of similarities between those healing techniques, etc., that actually work, obviously.
Yeah. When I go to India, I see people doing many of the techniques that I discovered in Africa, or a lot of the things that I've learned by studying Japanese traditional medicine, I find echoed in Russia or any other places in the world. Human beings are the same all over. Now, all over in the spiritual traditions, they say God created people, but he also created for every problem he's given us, he's created a solution for the problem. It's our job to find the solution. So oftentimes they say the solution is in the herbs or the plants that grow, and they're always growing around you. Whatever you need is around you. It's your job to look in nature and see the solution that God has already put there for you.
Someone wants me to ask you about Harry Edwards. Does that ring a bell with you?
It does not. I'm sorry, I just don't really know that name.
All right. Harry Edwards. Sorry, we don't know who it is. If you would have to name the most, or is there, in your opinion, something like the most powerful and universally applicable healing technique? Is there really something that sticks out for you?
Yes.
What would that be?
The most powerful thing that you can do to help somebody who has sick or bad feelings is put your arms around them and hold them. It's the most powerful healing technique I know. And sometimes I can change illnesses just by doing that.
That is amazing.
I can also stop a baby from crying. And I can make women feel more beautiful, and I can make men feel stronger just by touching them and accepting them. It's the best healing technique of all, and everyone can do it.
Well, yes, everyone can do it, indeed, yes.
And a lot of us won't. A lot of us are afraid of illness. A lot of us are so concerned with ourselves that we can't have concerns for others. There's lots and lots of reasons. Sometimes, we're afraid that if we touch someone, they'll misunderstand. Nowadays we have problems with adults who are teachers touching the students because it's misinterpreted. It is because, for instance, priests in the United States and all over the world have done behaviors that were acceptable in years past that are not acceptable now. So everybody is guarding against these things. So there's lots of reasons that we don't touch people, but it's the healer's job to do things that work. So the best technique of all is just touching someone with concern, with compassion, even we can say with love. It's the most powerful technique. Now, there's all sorts of ways to do that to become acceptable. I do this thing called body straightening, so I'm able to touch people in a way that is with respect and compassion, but also I straighten their body. It's sort of what a chiropractor does. The parts of the body have communication systems. In Chinese medicine or in what they do in India, you might call these things the communication systems chakras or meridians. And they say there's meridians that flow like the telephone lines are now flowing between you and I, carrying the words. But in the body, the telephone lines are the meridians. So sometimes there's blocks there, and you can unblock them through touch. Or the chakras in the body are sort of like cities. In Austria, there's Graz, and there's Innsbruck, and there's Vienna, and other things. And then there's ways that they communicate with each other. The highways or the telephone or internet systems they're all ways to connect the cities together. So we can look at the body and use these words. Often they come from not Western but Eastern medicine. We can learn about these systems and use them. Very powerful. But what I discovered is this: the individual healers get lost in their own system. The more powerful they become in their own system, the more the belief is that their system, whatever they do, is the answer for everything. So surgeons think everybody needs surgery, and that's the answer to questions. And therapists think everybody needs these types of, talking therapies. And we become so lost in our own system that we try to use our system to solve each problem. And I see that as a huge problem with healers of all types. Even in the alternative or natural, I know some people that say, everybody needs chiropractic or everybody needs to change things by what they eat. What I do is I look at people and I see what they're willing to do, what is their strength, and I suggest that they do what they're good at, or I tailor-make what I'm saying to be designed for the person to take advantage of their strengths and to use the doorways that are open. Sometimes I talk to people and their bodies are totally shut down. they don't even feel their own body. If I hit them with a hammer, they wouldn't notice. Or stick a pin in them, they've anesthetized their bodies. So for these people, I have to use mental or emotional doorways or avenues to communicate with them. For some people, their minds are shut down because they have a religious belief or a spiritual belief. They tell me it's not possible to influence somebody by talking to them or making suggestions or using their images. And for these people, I say, oh, you're very correct, but we're going to do some physical things. And then by doing physical things, I'm able to get the changes that we both look for. So it's not so important what I do. It's very important what I can get the people to do for themselves.
I understand, yeah. That does make sense. They're now coming to alternative medicines and food supplements, etc. There has been a lot of new regulation, especially in the European community, that came out in the last years regarding vitamin supplements and alternative medicines and herbs. First of all, how important would you judge vitamin supplements for health, and can you comment on these legislative developments that took place? I think you're in a good position since you're a lawyer, so or you have been a lawyer.
Yeah, let me do that. I've actually written a book about this, and it's a complicated subject in some ways, but I try to make it simple. It has to be simple, or I can't understand it. I usually use a point of reference to talk to people about these things by saying at the time of in Austria, for instance, is a mostly Christian background. There are other influences, but Austria or the United States was largely influenced by Christian people who in their influence created the schools, and it's the major pattern of thinking that we learned as children through our school systems. So at the time of the Christ child, there were 3 gifts to the child. They were frankincense, myrrh, and gold. Now, these gifts have very specific meanings. Gold was the symbol of the king or the emperor. Christ told us that. Frankincense is the symbol of the priest, and we know that because it's still used in the churches in Austria and all around the world. It's become actually a whole symbol of that system. Now, the priests, if we understand them historically, were the scholars. They were the people that could read and write. For a lot of time in our history, only the priest could read and write, and it was forbidden for the priest to teach anyone to read and write who was not a priest. There was a time when even the kings could not read and write, and the priest would be killed if they taught anyone, especially a woman, this ability to read and write. So the priests in this system with the frankincense are especially the teachers or the people who read and write, keep histories and accounts. And then the myrrh is called the queen of herbs. Now again, the gender is female. Because oftentimes healers have been more female than male. And what these 3 gifts mean is that the Christ was considered to be the leader of each of these 3 divisions of society. Now, for society to function carefully, it has to have 3 different types of leadership. One is the king, who is the police or the soldiers. The priest is essentially the scholar. He keeps the history and reminds us of behaviors, what we should do, and that sort of thing based on that. And then the healers, who have their own system of doing things. In the world today, as a result of historical trends, the priests and the kings made a conspiracy, or that's a hard word. At law, it's particularly a hard word, but they made an agreement amongst themselves to take away the power of the healers. There's a time in the history of this country and many countries where if someone was sick, their alternative was to go to the priest, and the priest would say, "You're sick because you've angered God." And the only remedy was to pray more or give gifts to the priest for the benefit of the church and that sort of thing. And today, as a healer, if I want to act legally or act in the way the law says I have to act, first I have to go to the priest through the schools, and I get the permission of them by passing their tests. And then I have to go to the government after I have the permission from the school and get a license issued by the government. They also make some examinations of me, and they check my history, and they check the credit history, they check your social history, they check see if you've ever been arrested, all sorts of things like that, before they give me a license as a healer or a doctor or a nurse or a dentist, any of these things. And it's kind of crazy because the people who I have to ask for permission to be a healer know nothing about healers. The king or the policeman know nothing about healing. The legislators know nothing about healing. In the United States, in Austria, in many places, what the government does to regulate healers is pick one group, one narrow specialty called allopathic doctors, and then they say that they're the only people allowed to heal, and that they have to have the license from the government to do that. So it becomes a problem. Historically, the healers were repressed, and historically they were even killed. That's probably what the Inquisition was about, and the witch hunts and all these other things that we know about in history were probably exercises by the government, by the religious authorities to do away with the healers. What's happening in the world now is that the people need healers. The world needs healers. The medical doctors are not enough. They're not doing their work adequately. And they're protected in the legal systems by having a license and by their degrees in universities and things. It's a form of protection. But people are looking for somebody else, and that justifies or is the reason that I function. It's the reason lots of people function. And we use some of the techniques and tools, healers use some of the techniques and tools that we would learn from the priests of Tibet, or the priests in the ashrams or monasteries or cloisters all over the world. Yes, these people have very good tools and techniques, and now we're borrowing them. The reason the healers have to borrow them is that sometimes the priests or the shaman or the monks in these cultures would take the wonderful things that they've learned and keep them for themselves, or refuse to use them for the ordinary people, sometimes saying that the ordinary people weren't worthy, or lots and lots of reasons, sometimes saying that this would lead to too much spiritual problems for them if they were given these powers. So for many reasons, a lot of these tools and techniques were available. They've been available for 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. People like me are discovering them. I do a lot of travel to discover these things and learn about them, and use them and teach them.
I mean, one example of a healer that also ended up in prison. I mean, healer. He was a psychiatrist actually originally. It's Wilhelm Reich. Mm-hmm. Wilhelm Reich. I'm sure you heard about him.
Yes, of course.
He's actually around this corner he came from this corner of the world, but he died in America in a prison. And he obviously also did something that some people didn't like too much. And I think that's very interesting that you say that the healers themselves don't want to spread their knowledge because it could lead to spiritual problems. I mean, that's kind of strange.
Let me say that more carefully. The priests, oftentimes, or the people who were cloistered, would sometimes have tools and techniques, but they would use them for themselves, or they would use them in their own hierarchies. And even the young people coming there were not given the advantage of some of these very wonderful tools and techniques until they had reached a certain level of advancement. Because what happens is that with these tools and techniques, you sometimes get powers that people don't want you to have. I mean, there's lots and lots of abilities that I can teach you, but anybody can learn, but they're illegal. The reason they're illegal is that somebody decided that people shouldn't do these things. The reason that the governments now are regulating the herbs and they're regulating the supplements and that sort of thing is to keep them out of the hands of individuals. It will become a huge problem for the doctors become a huge problem for the government to regulate the doctors if people have the tools and techniques in their own hands. We won't need the doctors. Then we won't need the government to regulate the doctors, and the whole system breaks down. It is a very well thought out, very mature, very powerful system. And if we have the medicines in our own hands, if we have the ability to heal in our own hands, then the medical system breaks. The need for the government to pay for the medical system would then be lost. And people would say, why should I pay all these taxes? Now the government says, oh, you have to pay these taxes because the cost of medicine is so high, the cost of building roads are so high, and all those things. But medicine is probably the biggest expense, other than military, that the government has. So the government has no interest in taking away the need of the people for the government.
So, I mean, a lot of things obviously have to change. I mean, someone just wrote in the chat that in the 40s or 50s, apparently there was a verdict, or I remember reading this, there was a verdict by the government saying that organ energy, for example, simply doesn't exist per a legal decision, as if that would be that easy. Now, what do you see, and we have about 15 minutes left now, we're coming up to the end of our show, it's just flew by. What do you see as the main social and governmental trends? I mean, you just mentioned the role of the government, etc. What do you see, how is this going to develop in the future?
Well, we have a big problem that the whole world is facing now. After the Second World War, the governments, because they had done so many terrible things and there had been so many problems, made decisions. They made them in a very bad way. They decided that people, for instance, should work to a certain age. In many places they picked the age 65. France has changed that. Other countries have changed that. But that after that time, the government should be responsible for making sure everybody had enough to eat and the food and that sort of thing. So they made a mandatory retirement in some places, or a suggested retirement, and they built social security systems on this idea. At that time, people lived to 67, 70 maybe. Very few people were living to 90 or 100. Now many people are living to over 100 years old, and the system won't work anymore. And people made contributions to the Social Security system, but that was treated just like ordinary income. It was not invested by the government. And now what happens is the governments cannot afford to pay the money that they promised to pay. So that has to be broken. The governments have to go back on their promises, and how they do that is not easy, especially when there's so many people elected. So there's going to be many changes in medicine because the governments can no longer afford the system of medicine that we currently have. So for sometimes for the people that I talk to very seriously about that, I say that the medical system we have has committed suicide. They did that by designing more and more expensive tools and techniques. So for an ordinary problem like a broken arm, you can no longer just go to the doctor and he puts the arm in a cast and away you go. We have to have x-rays and we have to have tests and many people, many doctors involved to read the x-rays and interpret these things, all for the protection of the doctors, not the protection of the people.
Yeah, that's an interesting problem. I mean, as you say, a lot of things are happening. You always have to get an x-ray for pretty much everything, and that's, as you say, not so much for your protection, but there could be something wrong, and if the doctor oversees him, you could sue him. So,
right.
So you have to get one x-ray after the other.
Sure, and you have to have lots of doctors involved. And what has happened as a result of that is that we now have a system that we cannot afford. And so
that's the main problem.
Now, what the governments will do is break the monetary system deliberately. The governments actually do know what they're doing, and it's not an accident that we're having so many problems with money and inflation. And in this country, as well as the United States, the cost of food is going up, and the cost of real estate is going down. so many people are confused as to what's happening, but the value of money, the what you can get with your money all over is going down for the things we need on a day-to-day basis. Now, if we were an investor and we wanted to buy land, that would go up. But still the price of the home for an average working person is beyond what they can pay for because they have so much more. So the economic system will change the medical system dramatically. And what is the future of medicine, whether it's natural medicine or what we call alternative or complementary, all those things, is that people will have to become more self-responsible. We're no longer able to just get sick and then find a doctor to take care of us. That's not going to work because we won't be able to afford that, and the government won't be able to pay for all of the care that everybody will need. Now, as the economic system breaks or the financial systems break, more people will have physical problems because there is a connection between what we can afford and our health. Anybody that works with poor people in medicine knows that. In the places where I live, most of my life in the United States, that poor people cannot afford to go to doctors for ordinary things, so they wait until it becomes an emergency, and then they go and get very expensive emergency care for what they should have done maybe a year or two before. So the system is already breaking. The answer to that is people need to be more self-responsible and self-aware. It's called preventive medicine, but it's self-prevention or self-awareness, and we need to learn to control our bodies and take care of things before they become huge problems. I do something called body reading. By body reading, it means I can look at someone and I know what the problems they have. I know what they're having today. I do this very often. Sometimes people come to me and they say, okay, you tell me what's wrong with me. I laugh and then tell them what's wrong with them. And almost always I'm accurate. But the other thing that you can do with body reading is you can see the problems people inherit. You can see the potentials. Another way of saying that, it's easy to determine who's going to get what disease, sometimes many, many years in the future. And that's going to become more important because we cannot afford to treat well-developed diseases. See, for instance, cancer is one of the big diseases. It's probably the second leading cause of death in developed worlds. So instead of the people that treat cancer always say, oh, early diagnosis is good. If you treat the cancer when you first discover it, it's much better than letting it go for years. And that's true. Now, the thing that is really effective is to tell people before they've been diagnosed with cancer that they're going to get cancer if they continue doing the things that they're doing now. So it's really simple to treat cancer 4 or 5 years before it's been diagnosed, or even 20 years before. So through some of the techniques that I use, and it's used in the sort of things that I do that we call alternative or complementary, we do preventive medicine. That is, we tell people what diseases they're going to get if they continue the same behaviors, eating the same types of food and doing the same types of exercises or lack of exercise, and living the same lifestyle. So self-responsibility and self-awareness leads to taking better care of yourself. Is eating more properly, or exercising in a better way. Exercising in a better way, incidentally, does not always mean hard exercise. Sometimes, if you're in bad shape, it means exercising very, very gently and not stressing your body with the trauma of trying to do too much exercise. And sometimes changing your diet is traumatic. So I never say to healthy people, I never say to people that are unhealthy or very sick, change your diet. I only say change your diet to healthy people. Changing your diet is traumatic. For the sick people, I say add some very powerful foods to the food you already eat so that you have more nutrition, so you have more of the minerals and enzymes, other things that you need. But I don't say add another trauma to the traumas you're already dealing with. So what we do in the best situation is get people to live healthy lifestyles, look at their lifestyle and change it if they're doing things that are injurious. A woman came to me today and she says, my big problem is I smoke cigarettes. Now, smoke cigarettes is a problem that she has, but that's not her big problem. Her big problem is she's constantly in stress. And if she can't discover or learn or adopt some anti-stress behaviors, she's going to be very sick very soon. The cigarettes are actually a tranquilizer and help her with stress. So stopping cigarettes is not a good idea for her at this time. When she gets a little stronger, stop smoking will be very helpful to her. But at this time, it would be a mistake for her to do that because it's one of the ways she copes. So the body reading I do gives me a very good idea of what's the problem people have. If someone comes to me, the first thing that I do is ask them simple questions like, how old are you? I'll ask them, are you married, or do you have a partner, do you have children? And I ask them about their work. Now, with those few questions, 4 or 5 questions, if I watch their responses, when they tell me, I know what the problem is, I know where their conflicts are, because of the way they look, the way their bodies move, by the words they say. I sometimes say to a person, are you married? And they will go, yes. So with an answer like that, I know there's a huge problem in their interpersonal relationship with their love partner. And so that's maybe where the conflict comes from. And if I ask people about the work they have, and they really can't tell me what they do, they say, oh, it's complicated. Well, come on. What work could be so complicated you can't express it in just a few words? So then I know there's a problem there. So I'm often looking for the conflicts that result in health problems in their lives.
Yeah, I think that actually was what most practitioners do. I mean, if you go to a homeopath, that's what he's going to do. He's going to talk to you and try to find out what's happening. He's going to look at you, at your posture, etc. And then, of course, there are various. Everyone has another tool set, and it looks like your tool set is quite broad. So, for people who got interested, who got curious on Georg Thomas, what are your next steps? We're coming up to the end of the show, about 2 minutes to go. So what are you doing next? Where can people maybe join a talk and hear to you, etc.?
Sure.
And hear you.
I have a website. It's my name, georgethomas.net.
And it's linked up, yeah?
Yeah. And then there's a place where I have products for sale where people can buy some of the best products that I've discovered in my years of work, and that's Georg Thomas Medicine Man, all spelled out, georgethomasmedicineman.com. And there I offer for sale some of the best products that I've discovered in the years that I've done these things. And then my email is G for my initial, G Thomas Healing. I write it all out, G Thomas Healing at AOL.com. So people can contact me and I can tell them where I am and what I'm doing. This weekend, I will do another program for people here in Austria. And then they would have to contact me and I could let them know when and where and what the costs are and things like that. Next week,
you do it in Vienna, yeah?
Yeah, in Vienna.
All right.
Actually, it's close to Vienna, not exactly in the center of Vienna. And then next week, I'll be in Germany. I'll be in a town called Friedberg, which is near Augsburg, near Munich. And this is a place I've been for many years. I've gone to this place. Some lovely people there invite me back every year. Last week, I was in St. Petersburg, Russia, and I have a health retreat or a resort in Panama where people can come. And I'll have programs there January and February of this year. I have 10 apartments on the beach, right on the Pacific Ocean in Panama. It's very natural, we call it rustic. What I mean by that is we don't have electricity, we don't have television, we don't have newspapers, we don't have magazines. We have a very limited amount of food. It's all natural, mostly vegetarian. We do have some fish. And sometimes people come there for a longer period of time with me. And this year we have several other good healers that are going to be there all at the same time. I'm actually making a community where healers can live together and work together. What happens with healers is we need each other. I realize that healers cannot heal themselves. Remember that the illnesses come from internal conflicts. When we have an illness, we need somebody else's help because we need to have somebody judgment from the outside, not inside. So I'm easy to get in touch with.
Okay, so your email address is gthomashealing, no dot or anything, just one word, gthomashealing@aol.com, and because already someone was asking in the chat, and people can contact you and find out where you're next, etc.
Yes.
Thank you very much, George. It was a very pleasant interview. It was very nice to talk to you. Let's see. Maybe we can do another show in the future if something happens. Or if you're around again, maybe you're even in Graz sometime in the future, and then we could do it live from the studio. In any case, I wish you all the best for your work and for your future work and for the people who come to you. Have a nice stay in Austria and have a nice evening.
Thank you, and thank you for all the hard work you do to bring this information to people. I'm very well aware of your reputation, and I appreciate the respect that you've shown me, and I return that respect for all the work you do.
Thank you very much. Okay, have a good night.
Good night, bye.
George Thomas, der Heiler. Er hat übrigens indianische Wurzeln, ja, weil das jemand im Chat gefragt hat. Und gthomashealing@aol.net, so erreicht man ihn. Das nächste Mal bei mir zu Gast ist Hilda Resch, und zwar geht es über das Wissen der Maya. Hilda lebt in Guatemala, das heißt, ist jemand, der wirklich mit den Maya Elders selbst zusammenarbeitet und da wirklich aus erster Hand Informationen bekommt, auch bei Sessions dabei ist, etc. Also das Wissen der Maya mehr oder weniger aus erster Hand beziehungsweise direkt von der Quelle. Hilda ist in Guatemala, das Interview wird auch nach Guatemala gehen dann. Ich hoffe, dass die Telefonleitung auch hinhaut. Jedenfalls passieren wird das Ganze am 2. Dezember 2011. Bis dorthin, danke allen fürs Zuhören und fürs Interesse. Bis zum 2. Dezember. Macht es gut.